Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Monday, May 23rd, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Fuad? Commissioner Sahakian?
Here.
Commissioner Yakubian?
Here.
Commissioner Welch? Chairperson Wiseman?
Here. What's next, please?
Item 1B is flag salute. Chairperson Wiseman?
Please join me in saluting our country's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And what is next, please?
Item 2 is posting of agenda. The agenda for the Monday, May 23rd, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, May 20, 2011 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Thank you. What's next?
Item 3 is approval of minutes. Item 3A is the March 28, 2011 regular meeting.
Are there any comments or corrections to the minutes from the March 28th, 2011 regular meeting?
Comments.
Seeing none, I would ask that this be approved by acclamation. Okay. All right. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve.
A second?
Thank you. All right. We'll keep it. What is next, please?
Item 4 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The Commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
I have not received any cards for oral communications. This is for items that are not a part of the agenda. And so we will go ahead and proceed. Before we get into the action items on our agenda tonight, there is a brief announcement I would like to make. We have 2 items that we're going to be considering. The first is proposed preferential parking for Kellogg Avenue, Pelanconi, Omar, Alma Street, and I imagine that's what most folks are here for. We also have a hearing regarding an application by for non-emergency medical transportation services. Since those types of matters generally take a whole lot less time than the preferential parking, we're going to move our agenda out of order and hear that item first, and hopefully we should be finished with it in a few minutes and we will move on. So if we could have item 6A.
Item 6A is report regarding application by VNA Medical Transportation for a renewal of an owner's permit to operate non-emergency medical transportation services in the city of Glendale.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Alina Morshidian will give you a brief staff report.
All right.
Good evening, Chairperson Wiseman, members of Commission. Before you, you have an application for renewal of permits to operate 3 non-emergency medical transportation vehicles by VNA Medical Transportation. VNA Medical Transportation currently is approved to operate 3 vehicles and is requesting to renew permits for the same number of vehicles. The applicant is a sole proprietorship operating under the ownership of Mr. Abajian and Mrs. Abajian. VNA Medical Transportation has been a service provider since 2002 in the city of Glendale. The applicant currently holds permits to operate non-emergency medical transportation in the cities of Burbank and Los Angeles. The applicant has established itself in the community and continues to serve the needs of its customer base in the city and adjacent areas. The company is in full compliance with insurance requirements, and the city is satisfied with the applicant's service to date. All the references provided were favorable to the applicant. VNA Medical Transportation, therefore, has satisfied all the conditions required per Chapter 584 of the Glendale Municipal Code for an owner's permit to operate non-emergency medical transportation services. Based on the statements of support that the applicant received from medical professionals in Glendale, staff respectfully recommends that Transportation and Parking Commission approve the application for renewal renewal of an owner's permit to operate 3 non-emergency medical vehicles by the same provider. At this time, staff requests approval of the findings for this operator. A motion is attached for Commission's consideration.
All right, thank you. Do any of my colleagues have any comments or questions?
No comments, no questions. I'm ready to move 6A1.
Do I hear a second?
Actually, I do have a
sorry.
quick question. I'm sorry, these are usually routine.
No.
And maybe, Jono, you can answer this question for me. I'm curious to know, and this always comes up about the training that goes on and the requirements, and not necessarily particularly in this with this applicant, but in regard to the training that they receive, I'd like to know if they receive specific training and education on distracted driving. And if they don't, then I'd like to see how we as a city can incorporate that into requiring it. I think that's a huge element in safety, and especially with the city of Glendale taking the lead on distracted driving enforcement and education. I think it would be the right thing to do to be having these non-emergency vehicles as they're going through the training to somehow become more sensitive, if it's not already part of their training, the drivers. So I wasn't sure.
Technically, by California Vehicle Code, they need to pass the driver's exam, obviously, to do that. In addition to that, their training consists of making sure how they routes and how they can get somebody into the vehicle and out of the vehicle. That's the extent of the training that most of these operators provide to the drivers. Beyond that, the best of my knowledge, there's no additional training that they can. The part that they have to be careful is because they're carrying somebody, either they're on dialysis or they're on a wheelchair, making sure that they drive safely, they drive slow, they don't take off because if somebody's secured with other medical equipment in the vehicle. Those are the types of driving. Other than that, it's expected that they drive as what is expected,
Right.
almost safe, and be able to do the defensive driving so they don't get into accidents. Because if they do, we will get their records. If an applicant has had many, when we do our background checks and we check the driver's license of the drivers, we will see if they have, they've had many accidents or speeding citations and so on and so forth, plus their insurance becomes an issue.
I think I was curious about that because I know that the public transit, require their drivers, that's what I understood it to be, require them to have some sort of training on, distracted driving. So I was wondering if that was something that we could also look into.
I can check into that further. The term that you use, distracted driving, I need to...
The cell phone usage, the texting, we can...
Yes, those types of things that are company policies that we expect the companies, but it's something that we can incorporate in our permitting, making sure that they have a policy or procedure that they do not
Right.
use cell phones or tax or whatnot. That's not something
to see that,
I don't
yeah.
think we need to incorporate in the code, but it's something we could probably add. That's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
As part of issuance of the permit, we make sure that that's incorporated in there.
Right. Thank you.
I think, if I may, Mr. Chairman, more than that, the law is the law. You can't drive. You can't train somebody how to use a cell phone because you can't use a cell phone. But I think it would be a good idea to see what's the disciplinary policy of the company. If they get somebody, one of their drivers, violates the law, then what action do they take? Do they fire the driver, or do they send them to defensive training? That's something that we might...
I think we can work with our city clerk's office that as part of issuing the owner's permit right now, that they show us a policy, or they don't have one, develop one, sign it and give it to us, so at least the drivers are informed that this is our policy. You have to adhere to it, although, like you say, it's the law. You're not supposed to use the phone. You're not supposed to be texting. But to reinforce that as part of their training.
or maybe a zero tolerance policy from the city side. Any transit driver or any mass transit driver or ambulance driver or for that matter taxi cab drivers, we can come up. But that requires an ordinance, if I'm not mistaken, correct, Ms. Sansone?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sahakian, that's correct. If we were to go further, we would want to consider having a change in the code to address that issue specifically.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? There is a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Fuad,
Yes.
Commissioner Sahakian,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Welch, Chairperson Wiseman.
Yes. Okay, now we will move on to, get back to my, and by the way, just to let folks know, I promise you I am not Facebooking up here. I actually have the agenda in front of me. I'm trying to... do this in a paperless fashion tonight.
Is that by choice, Mr. Chair?
Well, you know, we sometimes have to challenge ourselves to try new and different things, you know, to make progress. So our next item, if we could read it into the record, is 5A.
5A's report on proposed preferential parking for the 700 to 800 block of Kellogg Avenue between Pelanconi Avenue and Omar Street and the 700 block of Alma Street east of said alley to Kellogg Avenue. At 5A1 is resolution approving the following. To establish a 2-hour except by permit from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday except Saturday, Sunday, and holidays, preferential parking restrictions on the 700 to 800 block of Kellogg Avenue between Pelanconi Avenue and Omar Street and the 700 block of Alma Street east of said alley to Kellogg Avenue.
Okay, before you get started, John, I just wanted to announce briefly, I currently have 9 requests to speak on this item. If anybody else who has not turned in a card wishes to speak, there are cards in the back. Fill them out with your name and address and hand them to this gentleman at the front here, and you will be able to have your 4 minutes. The way this is going to work is that we'll listen to a staff report. The commissioners may have questions for the staff. We will then call on the public who have turned in cards to hear what you have to say, and we may ask questions of the speakers, and then we'll have a discussion among ourselves after we've heard from you. So at this, I'll turn it over to Jono Bagdanian.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Parking Commission, I'd like to have Tad Dombrowski, our parking manager, make the staff presentation, a comprehensive presentation, given that you have a number of people that are in the audience, that would explain the petition we have received, what staff is recommending, what the issues are. So with your permission, I'll turn that over to Tad Dombrowski.
Please.
Good evening, Chairperson Weissman and the rest of the commission members. The item you have before you is to establish preferential parking, a request to establish preferential parking on the 700 to 800 blocks of Kellogg Avenue and the 700 block of Alma Street. Back in March of 2010, a little over a year ago, the residents contacted staff and were stating that there were nearby employees in the 5900 and 5800 block of San Fernando that had been utilizing the adjacent streets for parking. They then gathered a petition together, and there were some initial, they were right on the borderline with the petition initially, and it took some additional time. Staff even submitted a second survey and mailed out a survey to all the residents in the area to verify that the petition did indeed meet the threshold, and it did, at 76%. At 76%. To request a preferential parking restriction. Staff went out and conducted a parking analysis and found that there were approximately 50 on-street spaces on the Kellogg section and the Alma section that's highlighted in yellow. During the day from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Approximately 73% of the street is occupied, taking the whole area, and approximately 84% of those vehicles are non-residents. Much of the demand in that area can be attributed to a very successful company, 4Over, which is located at 5900 San Fernando Road. They have approximately 127 employees and only about 43 parking spaces on site. With the increased demand at 4Over as well as other businesses on San Fernando, the Monday through Friday 9 to 6 hours, our customers and employees are utilizing most of the parking in the adjacent neighborhoods. There are only approximately 16 spaces on San Fernando between Omar and Pelanconi, which have no time restriction on them, so they would fall within the normal 72-hour range, which is nowhere near enough parking for that area. In conducting this petition, we also spoke with the residents on the red section of Pelanconi, which is further up. Council, back in 1981, had established preferential parking there, and it went all the way up to Burchett. Originally, the signs at some point in time never got installed or got removed from that one section, so a lot of those residents also said they were impacted and requested that that be put back in place. So there's no item that's required by TPC since the council already established that as preferential parking, but since it did contribute to this, we figured we'd mention it in the report as well. So with that, if you have any other questions.
One quick question, Mr.
Go ahead.
If there is already an existing zone for preferential parking, can't you just tack on and without coming to the commission, expand that?
The municipal code allows us to do that within 12-month period from establishing a preferential parking. So essentially that portion of Pelanconi no longer will be eligible. However, let's say if we established the preferential parking right now on Kellogg and Alma, within 12 months, if the problem shifts, which sometimes we anticipated that it happens, then administratively, again, we have petition, make sure the residents, 75% are in favor. We can do that without coming back to the commission.
Did you look at the parking issues on Omar and Kellogg below Omar and San Fernando? Because I see Omar is not a... You're only doing what there was petitioned for at this point. The expansion, if any, would go within the 12-month period.
Correct. And the expansion, if we did receive a petition, would be done administratively.
Now, you said on the block, in the 5800 and 5900 block, or those two blocks between Omar and Pelanconi, there were not enough spaces for employees.
Correct. And on those two blocks, most of the surveys we did on those two blocks for San Fernando Road, the parking was full almost all the time. Almost 100% occupied on those two blocks.
And what about north of Pelanconi? Would that parking be available for employees for the affected businesses, do you think? Or are they full as well?
North of Pelanconi, it did fall off a little bit. The occupancies, there were some available spaces. But again, there were only 16 spaces on those two blocks, so on San Fernando, there might be 8 or 10 spaces on the next block. But that wouldn't be enough to displace the whole.
Does staff give any thought or analysis of where the employees would park if the spaces aren't available on these side streets?
There are several options available. One of the things that we did notice is that the spaces that are on site are not maximized to their full use. There are still some reserved spaces for certain people, or there's available space to stack park if they chose to. There's also ride sharing and other things, and we'd be happy to work with them and offer up some of those options.
But even taking into account the reserved spaces and so on, at the end of the day, there would not be enough parking for the employees if the district were approved other than parking further afield. Is that correct?
Correct.
Chairman, the Commissioner Fott, unfortunately there is the parking along San Fernando Road where you have the retail or industrial-type uses are very limited unless they have off-street parking. Some of these uses, and we're very happy that a business comes into Glendale and it grows, as this business has, but unfortunately they cannot predict sometimes how much they're going to grow. As a result, their parking becomes an issue. In this area, we don't have any parking available because you're just next to residential areas. And there's nothing else available except if you cross the tracks, and on the other side, on the west side of San Fernando Road, there is on-street parking available. There is a potential because that's mostly a business area that employees may park on those, on Flower Street or Pelanconi in that area also. That is the option in the immediate future.
And there's no private lots otherwise that businesses could lease spaces from?
Not to our knowledge. There is nothing available in that area. All the businesses, they have the alley behind them, and they have their own reserved parking spaces. And obviously the residential streets that, again, we're hoping to limit this so it doesn't keep mushrooming to the adjacent street, because other residents are going to be impacted again.
John, my question is, in the report here, it's talking about an automotive repair business that's using some of that off-street parking for storing of vehicles related to their business that need repair. What does the code say about that, where you've got putting vehicles that are in need of repair, kind of parking it there?
Technically, any commercial business that, such as an automotive, should not be using on-street parking spaces for the storage of vehicles to be repaired. In that case, we have had complaints about the auto repair body shop, as it's been mostly parking on San Fernando Road, where in order to allow them to park there, because there's no other parking spaces, we didn't put any time restrictions on San Fernando Road. So, I know they have a turnover, vehicles go into the shop, they come back out. We've had complaints from the residents also in that area. And we've been trying to work with the auto body shop as a business in that area. So technically, they're not supposed to use on an ongoing, regular basis the on-street parking spaces. Again, it goes back to the issues we have citywide, where a business becomes very successful. The location is very important for that business. They've been established. For them to move, obviously, could result into some kind of an impact to their customer base. So they stay where they are, but then they create some of these problems, which in some cases they can solve by finding other storage areas where they can store their vehicle during the course of business. In other areas they can't, and they use the on-street parking, which is sometimes the case with the auto repair shop.
Point, and we'll hear name and for the record. Phone's not on. Sorry about that. That's what the phone ringing is, to tell me my microphone wasn't on. So I will try not to mangle your name when I call it. I'll repeat that in case it didn't get heard the first time. Please state your name and address for the record. And there's a timer that will go off after 4 minutes, and you'll get a warning light to let you know when you're approaching the end of your time. The first speaker is Ian Barrett.
Commissioner Weissman, Commissioner Cuban, Sahakian, and Fob, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I'm here representing 4Over Inc. 4Over is one of the great success stories of Glendale for the past decade. It's grown from a small business in 2001 to presently having in excess of 500 employees. We have facilities in 7 separate states, and we are expanding into Canada as we speak. Within the Glendale area, we employ over 300 people, and there are indeed about 120 in our 5,900 San Fernando Road offices. There are not 127, as it was stated, on the day shift. There are less on the day shift. It's in the 100 to 110 range. Those are the people who would be affected primarily by this this ordinance or this petition if it passes. I am here to make three principal objections to this petition. One is procedural, one is substantive, and one is ultimately philosophical in that this is perhaps the most anti-business petition that you could pass at this time, at least as directed to the businesses on San Fernando Road and in particular 4-over. There's no question that this is anti-business as far as 4-over is concerned. It will have a tremendous impact on us and our employees. So let's turn to the procedural issue. The procedural issue is that the city ordinance that governs this states that before a preferential parking district can be considered, there has to be a petition that is received with 75% of the residents in favour. The staff report, which we saw on Friday for the first time, reveals that the petition that they received, in fact, only carried 69% of the residents in favour. That alone should have called the petition dead at the door, so to speak. But instead, apparently, the city took it upon itself to send out notices for clarification, and in that notice, which went out in January, as I understand it, the city represented that they've received a petition that had 76% of the residents in favour. What that means is that the residents were receiving a notice essentially saying that this was a fait accompli, that it was done and dusted, they'd already received in excess of 75%, and therefore you may as well just live with it and sign up and go with the flow. In fact, there was less than 75%. That means that the petition should never have been considered. We shouldn't be here now. It should have gone back to the residents and they should have had to find that 75%. Whether they could have or not without the city's help, I don't know. Maybe they couldn't, maybe they could, but we shouldn't be here in the first place. Substantively, we have another issue, which is when you look at the city report, one of the requirements is that the city is required to demonstrate that there is not reasonably available parking to the residents. As we just had it described to us, there are some 13 spaces during the course of the day that are available for residents that are not filled. There are, of the people who are in that area during the day, only 6 of them are in fact residents. Now that tells us that if the residents don't have reasonably available parking, they will be filling up those 13 empty spaces, and they're not. So why? The question you have to ask is why? The reason is quite simple. It's that during the day, which is when the majority of this parking takes place, after the hours of 5 o'clock, there is no issue because all of our employees are at home or parking in our in-house parking. But during the day, the residents are at work, and yes, some of our employees are parking in that area. But we're not unreasonably burdening the residents because they're at work themselves. So from a substantive standpoint, I don't think that a compelling argument has been made that these residents don't have reasonably available parking. But my final comment is that from a philosophical perspective, this is a business-unfriendly petition. There's no question. We make every effort at 4-over to ensure that our employees park in a reasonable fashion. They do not go out and trash the environment. They do not go out and create a lot of noise. We make all of our in-house parking spaces as available as we can to everybody. We share them. We have 12 spaces where we do tandem parking, which means that we double up on our parking. And
I need to ask you to conclude, Mr. Barrett.
Whenever we are out of the office, we try and share those other spaces with each other. So in conclusion, I would encourage the Commission to reject the petition. Thank you.
Before you leave, I had a question for you. How long has 4-over been located in that building?
I believe since 2005.
2005? Okay. And at that time, when you first moved in 2005, how many employees do you happen to know?
I would have to guess 40 to 50.
So, and now it's around 120 for your first shift, you said.
The day shift is between 110.
So since 2005, there's been a definite expansion of business that's required the additional employees. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. First of all, I congratulate you on the growth of your business. How much of a hardship would it be for people to park on the other side of the tracks? I'm familiar.
Side of the tracks?
I'm familiar. I mean, there's a stoplight now at Pelanconi, so you can cross the tracks on a signal. How inconvenient would that be?
Tremendously inconvenient. I think you're asking them to not only cross the railroad tracks, but also cross San Fernando Road, which is an incredibly busy road.
But there is a stoplight.
There is a stoplight, but we're also talking about people who may be having to cross in the dark, inclement weather. There are all sorts of factors that come into play when you talk about crossing the railroad tracks and crossing a very busy street. And we do not know the availability of parking over there. The reference was made to the fact that there is more parking available further up San Fernando Road. I would dispute that. I go along there every day, and San Fernando Road, pretty much all the way up, is busy and packed with cars.
And what are your views on encouraging ride-sharing or taking public transportation?
We encourage it. Unfortunately, public transportation is not much of an option for some people. If it was, we would encourage that too.
I have a question for staff on the procedural points he raised. Do you have any comment on the petition gathering?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Fott, our experience with preferential parking is that we've had sometimes petitions in general, historically, that we receive, and the petition is, too many people signed the petition. And we find that in order to verify those signatures, either we ask them, we catch them, or actually it's been more effective for the city to send out a letter and saying, we received a petition, we want to make sure that you're in agreement, because we've had situations where a petition signed by 80% of the residents or 90%, it has to come to the commission. We notified all the residents, and then residents show up and say, I never signed the petition. I mean, there were some signatures from others, or husband and wife, or brother or sister, or multiple people signed on different addresses. That is not a true petition, so we end up going back. In this case, also, when a petition is borderline, there are times that we spend the time and effort in bringing an issue to the commission, and then last minute one person shows up and says, no, I didn't sign it, or I changed my mind. So we have taken the position that anytime we're getting a petition right now, we send a follow-up letter. It has nothing to do whether it meets the petition requirements or not. Because for the petitioner, it's also very difficult to knock on people's doors. Sometimes they're not there, they're on vacation. They can't get to it, and they will not respond to a resident's letter or of some sort. So we end up sending a letter to all the residents asking them if they're in favor of that preferential parking. We get responses back. We verify it against the petition if it meets it. We're not encouraging, discouraging any preferential parking permitting. We're not there to say we have to establish a permit parking. So that's as far as the procedure we followed in this case. It was just a follow-up to make sure that all the people who signed the petition, they really were in favor of the petition, because we know there is an impact to the businesses, and we know they're sometimes borderline, and some residents may not agree to it, as 25% or 24% of the residents were not in agreement, or they didn't care to sign the petition because they don't care in some way or another. That's the issue. Availability of parking, the code says that if more than 25% of the on-street parking spaces on a residential street are occupied by non-residents, then that street meets the preferential parking requirements. Most cases citywide where we have, the commission has approved preferential parking, it wasn't a case where only 30% of the spaces were occupied. In most cases, more than 50 to 75% of the on-street spaces were occupied by non-resident. That's why the commission has considered implementing preferential parking.
Well, even assuming it's more than 25%, did the staff do an analysis on whether residents are effectively being prohibited or prevented from parking on the street themselves?
The residents are not prevented. There is always, as I said, our percentage was
It was approximately 75% for the overall area. So, as you get closer to San Fernando, those percentages would increase. And let's say on the small section of Alma, you may have 100% occupied because there's 5 or 10 spaces that are further away on Kellogg where it meets Palancone. So the general average of the occupancy in all of the yellow section was 75% when staff did their surveys.
Well, did any residents say they couldn't park because of the commercial parking?
And I'm sure, Commissioner Fott, you could hear from the residents, there are times of the day that parking is more. We cannot be surveying it every day. So at the time we go do the survey, we take an average. So there might be days that we'll have more parking than that 75% that we surveyed. And as Tad said, you could have almost 100% parking in the spaces closer to San Fernando Road and less parking. So technically, yes, a residence at closer to San Fernando Road can walk about 10, 15 spaces and find a parking space to park. So there is parking available, not that there is totally no parking available. But people have groceries, they have elderly, they want to park in front of their home. Those are the type of things that our experience shows that the residents are encountering. That's what leads them to do the petitioning, because it's not one day, it's every day.
Okay, and finally, the speaker said that the city represented the parking petition had already passed and that it was a done deal. Is that the case?
Let me add, when the initial petition came in and did not meet the thresholds, a letter was sent back to the petitioner stating that he did not meet the 75%, and he went and gathered the additional signatures to meet that 75%. Came in at 76%. And because it was so close with the 76% where one person, one way or the other, would make that determination, the city sent, at that point, once we had a submitted petition that met the thresholds, we sent a letter to each one of the residents to verify that this is indeed what they wanted, and explained very clearly in the letter that this is the request that the city's received. Do you agree with this request? The result of that petition was also 76%.
Thank you.
Okay, and unless there are any more questions for Mr. Barrett, I'd like to let him sit down and we'll bring up the next speaker.
Just like to add one thing, which is I do think it's disappointing that the city staff could not consider alternatives. Blanket prohibition.
Okay, next speaker is Louis, I'm sorry if I get your last name wrong, 820 Kellogg. Is it? Well.
My name is Louis Biaco. I think we're all missing the boat here. There's more to it than parking in front of somebody's house for 8 to 10 hours and depriving people or guests from parking. There's street sweeping. Virtually can't be swept. There's cars all over in that area. I'm right on the end, right where it comes into Pelanconi. It's the inconvenience that we said, mentioned, that elderly people live in the neighborhood, they don't work, they need a place to park, they don't want to put it in the garage, they have to park it on the street for a few minutes or whatever. There is no parking. Then there's the other thing that happens. People smoke, they sit in their car, 4 or 5 cigarette butts go out, sometimes cigarette packs that's empty goes out. I've picked up cigarette lighters that didn't work anymore, dropped there. There's other things other than just the parking in front of your house. I want to ask another question. We have the remainder of Pelanconi that the signs were put up years ago and then somebody took them down. I mean the city took them down, not somebody. The city took them down. So they only go up to Kellogg. There was 2-hour parkings. So is that going to be established or is that part of this?
Mr. Chairman, since we have a petition for that, again, for that portion of Pelanconi, and council has already taken action on it, we will go ahead and install the signs, regardless of the commission action that will be taken for or against the petition that for Kellogg.
I think the petitions met the criteria that's called for. These people, they're not all from that one company. There's other companies, and they park all over the place. And they tell you, yeah, I'm going to be gone 8 hours. So what do? Do we have to park it in the driveway, our own home, or can we park it outside? There's no parking outside. And since it's brought up, I don't want to bring out things that maybe shouldn't be brought up here. They said that they have extra parking and they double up on the alley. How many of those cars are sticking out in the alley, which is illegal, and nothing's done about it? But that's another issue. That's up to the city to enforce. I thank you.
Okay, thanks. And if I could ask the audience, please, to remain quiet while people are speaking. Everyone will get a chance to speak.
I have a question for staff. Does the city take into account, are this mainly single-family homes, and does the city take into account driveway availability?
As part of, this is strictly single-family residential areas, and the residents do have driveways that they can park their vehicle there, but we don't take that into account in terms of the preferential parking requirements. We only look at the on-street parking spaces. So depending on how many vehicles a residence has, some they only have one vehicle or one car garage, and they have to park cars on street.
All right, next speaker is Zarek Megardichian.
Hello, my name is Zarek Megardichian. I'm CEO and founder of 4over Incorporated. Started in Glendale, lived in Glendale, started in Glen Oaks Boulevard with one office and 2 parking spots, and today our business has grown. In 2005, we moved into 5900 building, and at the time we had about 50 employees. This building had about 50 parking spots, and we didn't know we're going to have this kind of a problem that it's called, sometimes it's a good problem. We created jobs in our city. Over 60% of our employees work in Glendale, live in Glendale. And not only that, we bring a bunch of people to Glendale, which helps with the local economy. And this is very unfair for our businesses that you're asking us to go out, to move away, because if you close down one of the streets, and naturally the next street can automatically tag into it and start closing it down, and the guys that work here, they're going to have a hard time parking, and they got to go further and further, and so they can't really come to work. So somebody has to think about what happens to these people. Have you ever thought about them? What about businesses? What's wrong with businesses? What's wrong with creating jobs? Is there something wrong here? Because we can move out, but I don't think this is a good decision. I believe that you have to vote against this, because the only thing we have done is just helping, and helping the economy, helping our communities, and this is what we get in return. And we really controlled our employees, and I don't know what staff talks about the spots that wasn't utilized. I was on, just an example, last week I was on a business trip, so my spot obviously will be open for an entire week. So I don't know when this survey was done, but we really utilize our spot. Double parking, as the gentleman before me talked about, is our way of trying to really control the parking area. But at the end of the day, people have to work, and they have to come to work, and we can send them further down. And just to answer you, Commissioner Fout, we did encourage carpooling. We did actually paid for people that carpool together, but we saw nothing but problem. People's schedules was overlapping, a lot of issues. So we have done that in the past, but we haven't been very successful. So we'll do anything, and we're ready for anything compromising, anything we can work out. The street cleaning was an issue, which I agree with the gentleman right before. But we can make that a one-day cleaning day, that no one can park for a few hours, so the cleaning machines could come in and clean up the street. So at least the front of his house is really nice and clean. So that's all I'm asking for. Please consider all these jobs, and We got all the people right here. These are the guys that are going to get affected. They're all sitting right behind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for this? Okay, next speaker is John Kosiamba.
John Kosiamba. I'm on the governing board of the HOA, Pelanconi HOA down there. I also live in the area, the 900 block of Alma Street. A couple of points to counteract some of those. Driveway. I do not have a driveway that you can park in without infringing upon the sidewalk. It's not that big. Number two, I do have plenty of parking. I did have a couple of the employees, at least one employee, that came and asked me, do you mind if I park here every day? I said, fine, I got plenty of room at my place. So there is some room there. There's a second car that parks there. But eventually, if they're all forced to park up there, I will lose all that nice room I have. So we'll talk about that if it becomes a problem. Again, I'd like to reiterate that I'm retired. There's lots of retired people. There's lots of people that work in the movie business that don't work standard schedules. So there's lots of people that are home during the day and need this parking area too. Next thing, at Pelanconi in San Fernando, that crossing gate that you can cross there, that's one of your super special safety gates. There's 10 crossing gates there, super set of lights. It's very easy and safe to cross San Fernando at that crossing. Now, also at Pelanconi in San Fernando, you can't make a left turn there or can't go straight across there at that special place, but you can make a right turn. There's a very big red curb at 5914 there, so people can see down the street to cross. I mean, to make a right turn. At Kellogg in San Fernando, that's in front of the Armstrong Nursery. Again, if you want to make a right or left turn, there's a very nice red curb that allows people to see oncoming traffic for being able to make a cross, to make a right turn or a left turn. So, but when you get to Alma and San Fernando, there is no red curb. You want to make a right turn or left turn, San Fernando actually has a curve. It's very difficult to see, so it's difficult to make a safe right turn or left turn, and sometimes it's actually dangerous. What we have there is we really need a red curb right there on Alma in San Fernando. You know where I'm talking about? Right in front of the veterinarians. Because quite often we have people parking in that particular spot, sometimes with SUVs. That makes it impossible to see oncoming traffic when you need to make a right turn or left turn. And quite often they're infringing on the curb cut there for the corner cross. So I'd like to see a red curb put in that particular area so we can see down the street and make a safe right turn or left turn at Alma and San Fernando. I think I've pretty much covered it, and I'd like to compliment the one person who does park at my place and ask my permission if they could go ahead and park there, and they've been there every day ever since for about a year now. I don't know which company he works for, but very good. Questions?
Well, is the HOA then for or against the preferential parking?
We're for our members of the HOA, of course.
You're for the parking, preferential parking.
Right.
Okay.
Any questions about the red curb at San Fernando and Alma?
Mr. Chairman, we're looking into that.
Okay, thanks.
You'll see that if you just have a standard sedan, it's very difficult to see over almost any car there, especially since San Fernando has a curve to it too. Okay, thank you.
Okay, next speaker is Daniel Mori. Oh, sorry.
Before I start, I wanted to ask, I need to rebut some of the points that the first person made. Can I get a little extra time for that?
4 minutes.
4 minutes? Okay. I'll be quick as I can.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for this hearing today. Mr. Brown was very instrumental in showing us the process, and it came out peacefully, thankfully. There's many reasons for the request, not just the parking. The street sweeping was mentioned. I've lived there since March of 2003, and not once, and on a stack of Bibles, not once do I remember the sweeper sweeping in front of my house in the gutter.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you please state your name for the
Oh, I'm sorry. Daniel Mora?
Thanks.
I'm on the 800 block of Kellogg.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not once in 8 years. And it's kind of funny, it's comical because he's always going down the middle of the street. I mean, you could have your dinner on our central pavement because it's sparkling clean. The gutter has stuff there from years. My gardeners can't even get to it because there's always cars there. The garbage, daily garbage. And somebody mentioned the cigarette packs. Twice, I personally saw somebody eating lunch in their cars, and I waited, and when they opened the passenger door and went like this with the garbage, I came out and said, please, can you not do that? And he did it. He was very nice about it, but that's what it takes. Twice. More importantly, though, and this is something one of my neighbors just told me today also, happens in front of his house, in the winter, it gets dark at around 4:30, they got out around 5, and some of them hang out, and some of them do things that shouldn't be done in a public street. I found used condoms in front of my house once, and it turns out that somebody else will speak to, they found them too, because it's dark. I know, it's funny, it's probably one of you guys. Let's see. They cover our driveways twice. About this much of their car was, I couldn't get into my own driveway. I had to call, and they towed them, and it's on the record because they were towed. This was last month. One time a parking ticket because the same thing. They were right in the driveway. They literally inches sometimes. There's been numerous confrontations, not just myself. I mean, I'm generally very pleasant to deal with. I'm well-mannered. But there have been almost near confrontations, and there was a confrontation with one of my neighbors, who I won't mention his name. The next day, or within 2 or 3 days, his tires were slashed, and my daughter's tires they let the air out, all 4 of them. That was one or 2, 3 days before, after. Probably at night. When else? That's when cowards strike. The cans are always moving the cans. It's a pain in the butt because then we got to take them out. Otherwise, the garbage guy has to come out and pull it out. Or a couple times they didn't even take the garbage because they'll press right up to the garbage cans, and sometimes they'll even move them. And they put them up on the grass a couple times. But most importantly, and this is the most important point for me because I'm married and I have 3 daughters. And I, like Lou mentioned, also have a schedule that I'm not there 9 to 5 all the time. Sometimes I work at night, sometimes weekends, sometimes I'm all over the place. So sometimes I come in a park, and my wife, who's also going to nursing school, sometimes she can't park on the street. So I have to move my car. My daughter, who's in school and working, also same thing. The other one, same thing. Sometimes they park, 1 or 2 blocks away. Well, 1.5. The workers, DirecTV, Terminix, when they show up and they have equipment, they have to log it from like another block and a half. Now, I look at the alternatives because I was an employer one time too. Their alternatives have no cost because San Fernando, north of there and south of there, there's quite a few. There's about 7 or 8 spots, starting with the body shop. And then there's, let's see, where else?
I'm going to need to ask you to conclude, please.
Okay, well, just the alternatives. Across the tracks, they're equidistant. The same distance from where I live, by the time they get to the front of their place, it's the same distance on San Fernando, and even shorter across the tracks. And I understand tracks, it's a crossing, but there is a pedestrian crossing, and either it's safe or it's not safe.
Okay,
if it's not safe...
I'm going to need to ask you to finish up, Mr. Moore. Your time is up.
And that's it. I have a bunch of points I wanted to retort, but there's no time. Thank you.
Chair, I do have a question. How do you know that it's this company's employees?
Because...
Hold on, I'm not done. It's this company's employees doing all the nooses on the street when not too far from you, there's an adult entertainment center, there's a nude bar. How can you...
That's like 2 miles away.
Well, it's not miles away. It's within
within
a 3-4 minute driving distance.
Right.
3-4 minutes driving distance, right? All I'm trying to say that it cannot be pointed to only this company. Okay, as much as I sympathize with you, okay, and my record stands clear as far as preferential parking, but it looks like accusations that shouldn't be done in public. Because we don't know it's them. There's other businesses on the same side of the street too.
Okay.
Am I correct?
Well, since you asked, do I get enough time to answer that?
Just a quick, brief answer.
Yeah,
I don't want to go
know
back and forth.
I know because I see them. I'm at home most of the time, and when I come home, I see the cars because this has been an issue. Like I
But
said,
you know it's you know for
I
a
know
fact
it's
it's
them.
their employees.
Couple times-
That's all I need.
yeah, follow them to
That's
the
it.
company. I even went and
That's
talked to the
fine.
manager.
That's all I need.
Thank you.
Jono, can I ask, just jump in here, he brought up an issue about the, it seems to be always coming up, the street cleaning. In that area, I don't get the sense that there's mandatory no parking on a particular day for street cleaning. I know that happens around the city, that they have the no parking. Is there any of those signs in that area at all?
I don't think we have on that street signage that restricts parking for street cleaning on one side and then restricts parking on street cleaning on the other side. That's something we will check into, but if the parking occurs all day, it will be difficult to clean. So, but then in some residential streets, by doing that, it makes it even worse. The on-street parking becomes worse because residents can't park there, the businesses can't park there either. But we will look into that as far as the street cleaning.
Right.
And install signage if it's needed.
Okay, the next speaker is Don Walters.
My name is Don Walters, and I work for 4Over. I'm a supervisor there. I wanted to borrow a teleprompter, but Barack Obama's using it, so I'll just bring a piece of paper. 4Over does have over 100 people in our corporate headquarters, which is on San Fernando Road. It's a total environment of offices, so it's nice and clean. There's no icky stuff coming out of our place. My question is, what effects do our employees have on the city? They eat lunch, they buy gas, they have their clothes cleaned, they go to the dentist, they go shopping, they spend money with other businesses in Glendale. We do charity events. 4Over has raised approximately $3,000 each year for the annual Toys for Tots drive. We've done so well that we've actually been on Channel 7 News twice. They actually had the crew come out. We do blood drives, we do Revlon Walk for the Cure, we do children's center events, we do homeless shelter events. It appears that despite all the good things we do have one vice. Some of our people park on public streets, but only those who do not fit in our own parking. Of those who do park on the public streets, half of them leave at 3 o'clock. By 3 o'clock, they're gone. The remainder, at 5 o'clock, move into our garages. So we're completely off the street by 5 o'clock every workday. We're completely off the street Saturday. We're completely off the street Sunday. If the Glendale City Fathers see fit to impose 2-hour parking, it means a significant portion of our staff is going to get up from their work every 2 hours and then go out and move their cars. In these competitive times, is that what we want? Is that going to hurt our productivity? Will that make Glendale businesses more competitive or less? Will our company continue to succeed or not? Please keep Glendale a business-friendly city and allow us to keep over 100 jobs in Glendale. One more thing that's been brought up. Some of our people have been harassed by the neighbors in the neighborhood. They'll say very mean things to them. There's confrontations. That's true. Public street, it's legal to park there. And if any of our employees are doing anything that's illicit or illegal or wrong, we want to hear about it because we will discipline those people. So we don't want that kind of thing to be happening in our neighborhood either. I have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, can I ask you a question? What are your thoughts about the parking, having employees park across the tracks?
I'll be honest with you, I haven't gone across the tracks to see what's there, so I don't know. I can't say with authority that there are lots of spots, not enough spots, no spots. I just don't actually know the answer to that question.
Jano, can I refer to you? What parking availability is there?
Well, that Flower Street, which is, Pelanconi on the, if you look at San Fernando Road, Pelanconi is on the east side, Flower Street is on the west side. There is on-street parking. There's some parking that is adjacent to the city's Grayson Power Plant, and there is parking on Airway that, again, there are other businesses that are all established off of Airway and on Flower Street. As you know, the Disney is expanding in that area. New buildings are being built. So the on-street, they are building enough parking for their employees, but there's still a lot of businesses that are in that area that are also relying on the on-street parking. There is enough parking, again, within a walking distance. How far you have to walk to find a space depends on time of the day. But there is parking on the west side of the tracks that you can safely cross at Flower Street and find parking, on-street parking. May not be as close as the employees are parking today, but there is parking. I can't give you a 100% number as to if we can accommodate all the employees or part of the employees that are on that street.
Johnny, you mentioned Flower in those streets, but isn't San Fernando, in that area, that's quite a distance. Isn't just on the other side of the tracks San Fernando Road West or whatever it's called?
San Fernando Road, if you cross on west of San Fernando Road is where the new at-grade crossing was built.
Right. But the immediate street on the west side, isn't that San Fernando West?
No. San Fernando West does not go that far.
It's below
San Fernando West is south of Doran Street, south of 134. What you have is immediately is Airway as you go past San Fernando Road.
And that's the city of L.A.?
No, that's all Los Angeles. That's all city of Glendale all the way to the 5 freeway.
Okay.
Anything else I can help you with?
If there's no more questions for the speaker, no. Thank you.
Jano, I had another question for you. The gentleman raised the issue of, and we've had, you can sit down. We've had this in other parking districts, the phenomenon of employees moving their cars every 2 hours. But I know in other districts they've complained that's just a workaround. How does the city deal with that?
Well, you're not supposed to do that. Technically, if you're parking on one space, you can only park there once per day, unless you've moved your vehicle about 200 feet from that location that you parked. So let's say on Brand Boulevard, if you're parking on Brand Boulevard right now when it's very much retail-oriented, if you park on one side of the street in a space, you cannot feed the meter, for example. I mean, if you did, you still are in violation, technically, by the city code. So you have to move your car at least 200 feet from the location that you were parked so that you're not in violation of the municipal code.
Is that, in fact, is that enforceable? I mean, has it been enforced in other areas?
We have enforced it mostly in the retail areas. We don't necessarily enforce it in some of the areas such as this. Again, it's an enforcement issue in terms of availability of resources. So, obviously, if we get a lot of complaints, we go and enforce it. But in most cases, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have one question to any of the members of the company. The 110 employees, they come at the same time and leave at the same time? Or it's different shifts throughout the day?
Okay, we can't capture your words for the record if you're not at the microphone, so if whoever would like to respond can step up to the microphone. Thank you.
Sorry, it's Ian Barrett again. People come in between the hours of 5 in the morning and I believe 2 in the morning, all the way through to 2 in... No, they don't come in at 2, they stay until 2 in the morning. On the day shift, they come in at 5, then there are more people coming in around 7:30, more people around 8:30, then they start leaving. As Don stated earlier, there's a substantial number leave around 3.
What's the bulk, the biggest group of people that come in for the day shift and at what time?
8 to 3, between 8 and 3. That'd be the biggest bulk of people.
So you don't have a rush where, let's say, 25 or 30 employees, they come in and report to work at 8 a.m.? You do?
Yeah.
You do have that?
We would. That would be the bulk of the people coming in between probably 7:30 and 8:30.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Jack of Jack's TriStar Motors.
They left.
Okay. I'll put this aside, and Next speaker is Don Margolin.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Don Marglin. I live at 1566 to Midway Street in Glendale, and I have restricted parking. So I can tell you what it's like. It's not that great. First of all, if you don't put this pass on, even though the computer shows my house and I park in front of it, I get a ticket. And if I go to the police department and ask for a form to explain why I forgot to put this on, they don't accept it. So each time I forget this, I have to write a check. And on March 14th, I wrote a check for $46 because I got in my vehicle, I took down my permit, and I got a phone call. I went in the house, and I answered it on the home phone, and I came back, and I got a ticket. And there's no turning back, $46. So when we get if this goes through, the residents can have a checkbook and pay their tickets because the city won't change their minds. Also, when it's an overcast day and your windows are all fogged up and they don't see this, that's another ticket. But we did get that turned around. I also work at the LA Weekly in Glendale, which is at 5838 San Fernando Road. Now, we only have 4 people working. It's not a big company. It's very small. And we have parking for the people working at our company. However, on Thursdays, we have a delivery, and a truck comes in and drops off the papers, and the employees can't park there. Only Thursdays. So if this goes through, we have nowhere to park on Thursdays, the only day we don't have parking for ourselves. Crossing San Fernando Road, it seems like a good idea, but then you also have to cross the railroad tracks, and it's not a very safe thing, in my opinion. I mean, it seems like it's not that bad, but I wouldn't want to do it. So I think that on the street sweepers in my area, they come early in the morning before people come to work. They work in the dark. Most of them do, it seems to me. I don't normally see them during business hours. And the residents, a lot of them have driveways, but for us who have no place to park, we don't have any. When our driveways are being utilized with a delivery, or we can't use it for one day, we have nowhere to go. So that should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremiah Blattler.
First off, I'd just like to thank you guys for allowing us to present a case here.
Okay, could you state your name for the record, please?
Jeremiah Blattler.
Thank you.
I'm an employee at 4 Over. Contrary to what Mr. Morris said, I don't smoke, I don't eat in my car, and I don't commit lewd acts. I'm married too. I don't have 3 daughters yet, but I'd like to one day. Now, I have to work every day, and I'm sure he does too. We all have to go to work every day, and we need somewhere to park. Now, they can return back to their driveways for the most part. I believe one gentleman said he doesn't have a driveway. But by and large, they have driveways. And some of these driveways have more than one car. I only take one car to work. Now, the question was asked, if we carpool and if we take mass transportation. I tried. I live in Alhambra. The Gold Line goes diagonally southwest to downtown. So after that, after I take a bus from Alhambra to Pasadena, I'd take the Gold Line into downtown. Then I'd take another bus zigzagging back up to Glendale. I'd probably get there in about 2.5 hours. Now, in my car, I can probably get there in 20 to 30 minutes. You know, I mean, I'm just being pragmatic about things. I think this is a great inconvenience. You know, on top of that, it's just a classic case of NIMBYism. Now, I'm not trying to paint a picture that the homeowners there, you know, are greedy or they're trying to push us out, but they're taking away a lot of parking from us, and they're taking away, you know, basically a place for us to go. We don't have anywhere to go. They mentioned the amount of space that we have, and we double park. The other gentleman mentioned a circular argument, and that our double parking is violating some rules. But, I mean, in essence, we're trying to save him space. It's not like we're not trying to work with the community. We are as best we can. Now, I could also paint a picture of the residents and claim that they've been doing lewd acts or they've been threatening me and say that I've seen it with my own eyes. But we can't substantiate those claims, just like that gentleman back there can't substantiate his claims. It's like claiming the tooth fairy exists. I'm not going to say those things about them. What I will say is I usually park 3 to 4 blocks away. I don't park in that zone. I park further away. I find parking. I don't have a problem with it. I never argue with the neighbors there, and they never argue with me. I have nothing against them. Now, I do know that if you take away the parking that's directly adjacent to there on those streets, I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen because I looked in those notes and it said there's somewhat of a contingency plan. So after that, what's to stop the other residents from asking for their own preferential parking and so on ad nauseum? Where then will we park? Perhaps in the city of LA, further south, maybe we'll park in Eagle Rock. I don't know. I mean, you know, I'm being facetious, but it is a rational statement to say. I would like to ask the Commission, where would we park if they perpetually would keep doing this?
I'm going to save my comment for later.
We'll say we're not going to get in a back and forth with you, but we'll address your comments.
I'm not trying to get in a back and forth. I mean, just logically speaking, you mentioned the alternative of going across the tracks, where I believe there's DreamWorks SKG. I imagine they have a very, very, very large lot, and they may have enough spaces, and they may not. And there are other lots, too. If you look in the area, I believe 90% of the business on San Fernando Road is industrial. We're actually not industrial. We're a corporate office. We don't have any environmental codes that, we're violating, per se. I mean, we're across from a hydroelectric steam plant, I believe. There's a train that runs by, there's tons of noise, there's industry. We're not even doing that, yet we're being chastised. I don't find a very rational, sound argument.
I need to ask you to conclude, please.
Okay. In conclusion, I'd just like to mention, I think 4 Over's done as much as it can to work with the community. I think that by and large, the residents there, they're good people and they're fairly rational, as evidenced by under 75% of them voting originally until it was proposed yet again. I think there are...
You need to conclude, sir.
Okay.
Your 4 minutes are up.
That's fine.
Thank you. Randy Sarmiento.
Good evening, everyone. Pretty much everybody mentioned what I wanted to mention. All my neighbors mentioned all the important things I wanted to mention, but there were some pictures that was given earlier that was taken, I believe, today by my neighbor, and it shows there that they're not fully using their parking space, and that hasn't been mentioned yet, so I think that's a pretty important thing to see.
Yeah, we've received the pictures. Anything we receive does become part of the public record, so it will be included in the record, and I'll pass them around. My fellow commissioners can see them.
Because as my neighbors told me that between 8:45, at 8:45 we took the picture at the garage. There was no parking, there was no one parked there, as you can see. And at 8:46 he took a picture on the street, and the street is full with cars. So just looking at that is an evidence that they are not utilizing their parking space at all. And it's been going on for many years. I've lived there for 11 years, and every year it's becoming worse and worse. So hearing all these problems, all the concerns, I think the best is the Flower Street, especially they just did that. Opened that up just recently, and I just walked there today. It's not a far walk. It's 2 blocks. It's the same 2 blocks that they walk from their company to our home. We are not trying to kick them out. There is parking on Flower Street. That's an option. As a homeowner, as all of you, I'm sure as a homeowner, you guys don't want that happening in your street as well too. We welcome all the businesses in Glendale, and I'm glad Glendale is booming and their company is booming. But the thing is, there is option. There is Flower Street, especially now that it opened up. And also, just piggybacking on my neighbor's comment earlier about that condom found, there are kids play there every day after school, almost every day. I have 2 kids, 7 and 12. Okay, and my wife, she's the one that one of them found the condom, and other people as well too. So that is a big concern. That's a health concern, not just for safety. It's also for health issues. Kids are always, just they want to just explore, and they don't know what they're touching sometimes, especially if there's a 4, 5, 6 years old. So that's a big concern too. So you guys got to look at those things. So I just want to conclude that as a citizen and a homeowner of Glendale, I just want to, if you guys can please keep our street safe and clean. And if you put yourself in my shoes, in our shoes, as homeowners, I'm sure you'll understand and we'll implement this preferential parking as well too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One more try for Jack of Jack's TriStar Motors. Going once, going twice. Jack. And I think I have
a couple of more cards, I think.
Now's the time if anybody else wants to speak on this. Okay. Next speaker, Chris Barris.
Thanks. My name is Chris Barris. I'm a resident of the 800 block of Kellogg, and I'm also a 4over employee. In fact, the reason why I'm a resident of Glendale is because of the proximity to 4over. As for the parking on Flower across the railroad tracks, is there any kind of, do you know how far the red zone in front of the power plant extends to, or is that all free parking?
I don't know. John?
I can't give you...
I recall that some of it is marked as a red zone. I'm not sure how far that stretches down. This would be on the south side of Flower across the railroad tracks.
Mr. Chairman, one is there's an access immediately past the tracks on the south side of Flower, which provides access to the Grayson power plant. And immediately to the west of that, there is red curb. One is originally for sight distance problem issues. Secondly, is for security reasons. So, but as far as how far that goes, I can't give you that information unless we do a field survey.
Yeah, and I'm speaking not just in terms of where my coworkers at 4over are going to park, but there's also a number of empty office buildings there on San Fernando Road, especially as you get up towards Grandview, and I think would be very difficult to attract businesses to move into this area if there was preferential parking all in this area. And just as lastly, in terms of speculation, I've lived at 806 Kellogg for about a year and a half, and haven't seen any of the issues with trash or noise or any of the disturbances that some of the other residents have been reporting. I'm just speaking for myself, just not, but I live and work within this 2-block area for more majority of the time. And really just the loudest thing that I hear is the Metrolink and the Santa Fe Railroad. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Alec Gazarian.
Thank you, Commissioner. I also work at 4over. I've been working there for 7 years. And when we moved to 5900s, I was there since the first day. As far as, it seems like the problem is, what we hear today is the parking issue. But the neighbors' complaints, it seems like it's more attacked to 4over and our personalities than parking issue. Did you guys all agree that there is no parking issue? The main issue is trash, not cleaning, and people having sex in the streets. Even if they change the hours, after 6, people can park there, and if they claim that, We all have families. We don't work at the strip club. It's a known business. We're known around the country, and we're expanding all over the world. We also expand all over the world. So we're not there having sex, trashing places. We all live in Glendale. We have houses too. People park in front of our houses too. So it seems like the issue is not the parking. The main issue is not a parking. If there's an issue regarding trash, we can resolve that. If there's an issue people having sex, that's not a parking issue. We have a police department. They can call, and if people are trashing, they can also, if the people are smoking in their car, it's non-smoking area there. They're not even supposed to be smoking there. So all they have to do is just call, and police will come, give them a ticket, and this issue will solve. So by listening to all the neighbors' complaints, and I know a couple of them. I've been working there for 7 years. And I talked to most of the neighbors there. We used to play outside. There used to be some issues. And I also work at front desk. So if there's any issue, they come and talk to me. And even if I can resolve it, if I can talk to management, we can solve it. So all I can think of that the problem is here is it's not a parking problem. It's just a couple of neighbors trying to trash our business, which we're expanding. And Glendale, I know the city of Glendale is spending a lot of money trying to attract more businesses. Because if I'm not exactly sure about the numbers, but 30 or 40% of the high-rises are empty. And we spend money to bring business in Glendale. And when there's a successful business, where most of the 60% of employees work at Glendale. So it's not some business it's not Disney, so people don't come from LA or Burbank. We all work here, and we live here too, so it's not... All we're trying to do is just work, be a good business, support our community, and trying to work, and that's all we're trying to do. We're not trashing the neighborhood. If there's a problem with the trash, cleaning, all the problems can be solved. But if you close the streets that we park, and the next neighbors will do it like they said, and we can't park anywhere. I know it's nice to have a house without any cars parked in front of you, but that's not reasonable. I mean, we live in Glendale, there's businesses next to it, and all we're trying to do is just work there and have a great business and expand. I don't see anything wrong with that, and I don't see anything wrong with the parking. If that was the issue, we'll have more neighbors here complaining about parking spots. But it seems like most of the complaint is people having sex and trashing the streets, which is not even... They said it's us, but it's not proven. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard LaFava?
It's LaFauci.
Sorry.
Thank you, everyone, for letting me speak. My name is Richard LaFauci, for the record. I am not going to talk about condoms or sex today. I have an official letter of complaint against, if that could be submitted. I just wanted to stick to facts. The stories about the condoms and the trash and all that, it's all unsubstantiated. I wanted to talk about fact, and we've heard it many times today, that if this does pass, it could mushroom and the other streets could follow on, and then eventually we could have no place to park. I'm a resident of Glendale, soon to be a homeowner in Glendale. I work in Glendale at 4 Over, and I frequent the businesses there. If this happens, it's going to be more than an inconvenience. I heard inconvenience said a number of times today. It's going to be a hardship. Taking railways or sharing rides. We all try to do that, but this is going to be a hardship, and it's going to be a hardship that's going to be forced upon us, not something that we have a choice about. We all have a choice of whether we want to do ride sharing or whatever. This hardship will be forced upon us, and I'm going to speak from myself in the fact that if it happens like that, I will be forced, or I may be forced to look at my options as far as possibly leaving the company. Under no fault of the owner or anybody under the fault of not being able to park. Because that will be a hardship for me. I will be able to go on to another company and possibly have parking with no problem. And parking is a big issue when you're going to work every day. And I like 4over. I like working there. And I just implore all the members of the board just to look at these people that are here today and consider the jobs and the families. I have a family to support. I have a wife that I have to support with this job, with this money that's coming in. I just wanted to ask that. Thank you.
Thank you. William Barrett.
My name is William Barrett, and I work at 4over. And I just wanted to make one point about the pictures that you guys are looking at. And I think it is absolutely ridiculous and would be an egregious misstep to use those pictures against us. As the city attorney said, that when they do their sampling, and I believe you said the same thing, when you do sampling, you take it as a multiple day sample size. You don't look at it at one time. Those pictures are taken at 8:45 on one day. I think we can go out on any day on the street and find many open spaces that would prove our point more than they would prove their point. And I think you shouldn't use those pictures.
Okay, thank you. Elmer Artiga.
Hi, my name is Elmer Artiga. I work with 4over for the past 6 years. Lately, I had to have another job. That means that at the time that I get out from 4over at 4 o'clock, I have to walk across the San Fernando Road, which is rush hour, past the train track, rush hour, and go to my car, drive back, and go back to Sherman Oaks, where I have a part-time job. If they take, if you guys restrict the parking where I am, where we are parking in Kellogg and Alma, where I don't have to cross any major roads, any train tracks at rush hour, it will be grateful, because everybody's been talking about parking, street cleaning and everything, but nobody has talked about the safety of the people that work there, crossing a major highway, well, not a highway, but a street. A city can have a lot of security put into the streets, but you don't have the constant of the driver. We're in LA, we're bad drivers, you know that. We have seen a lot of traffic crashes in front of our building, even though that light is there on San Fernando Road and Palancone. We're drivers, we are distracted drivers, and I'm one. I have got into accidents also. But because of that, I learned that you can have a lot of safety things on the streets, but you never know when an accident can happen. You've seen the news about people getting hit by the trains, even on the train stations. Imagine on the train track when they're full speed. Even on passing San Fernando Road, people have crossed that light in red, and I've seen them because my desk is in front of the San Fernando Road, and I have a window. I see everything there. So if you restrict the parking in the Kellogg and Alma Street, you're putting us in a lot of risk crossing that street in the morning and at night, in the afternoon. So that's my point. Take in consideration the safety of the people that work there. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for
Sure.
I have a question for one of your managers at the company. Looking at these pictures, I notice these stalls have a red sign in front of the stall. What do those signs say? So they are reserved spots for people.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, on these pictures that one of the gentlemen took of your parking spots, I see there's red signs in front of the parking spots.
Correct.
And I guess they're the names of officers of people.
Absolutely.
So are they reserved for those people and therefore unavailable for others? Which would
correct.
seem to be a waste of space, parking space?
That's correct. Those are reserved for officers, and they're very limited. I believe we have about underground parking is about 27, if I'm not mistaken, or could be more or less. And they're pretty much filled. The only 3 spots that we just got we have a free 3 spots that was opened up over 2 weeks ago, which we actually moved. We had a tenant. We moved them. We paid them to move out, so we can take over their spot and their parking spaces. So those 3 hasn't been assigned because we're still work in progress. We're cleaning up the suites. But those are the only 3 that right now hasn't been assigned to anyone.
Okay, and also looking at this, and this is also a question for the city, the space between the cars parked like this is quite wide. Have you looked into, or could it be extended for tandem parking?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ford, I think something we need to look at, based on what was originally approved for the building versus allowing tandem parking. I mean, in the downtown, with the new standards, we do allow tandem parking. It's something we can work with the planning department in light of the issues that we're facing to see if that can be approved or if it will require approval.
Okay, thank you.
Issue on tandem parking, are you talking about tandem parking inside?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the spot here. It looks like there's very wide aisles.
I can only tell you that I have a lot of trouble backing my car out just to get it out, so I do not believe the tandem.
Okay, fair enough.
We can't have a free-for-all here, folks. If there's any specific questions for any of the speakers. Okay, at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing, and the commission will deliberate. Which lucky commissioner would like to start?
I can start.
Please.
I mean, it's not a secret that employees are parking in the residential neighborhood. I mean, the management is here, the employees are here, and they're asking to do so. Now, at the same time, I do not see 100% occupancy on the residential streets. 10, 12, 13 spaces are spaces. I live next to a park, and often I have to park a couple of 100 feet away. If I'm to implement and ask and petition for preferential parking, then I'm basically keeping kids away from the park, because I guarantee you I'm at 100% occupancy, and most of them not living in the neighborhood. Now, having said that, I also don't see a good effort by the company management to be a good neighbor and solve the problem. I honestly don't. The fact of the matter, or the matter of fact, parking across San Fernando Road, I don't see that as an issue. I mean, I understand you might have to walk a little longer. If it's not as safe as people are saying, and I don't doubt that, it's an industrial area, then the management can approach the city, ask to install additional lights to make it brighter. They can hire a crossing guard maybe during the hours that all employees are leaving. I mean, this is a company that's doing very well, right? So I'm assuming financially they're doing well too. I just don't see the effort from both sides, honestly, to resolve this problem. I'm not ready to vote on this. I think they should go back. They should discuss it with the help of staff. Maybe commissioner gets involved where we can see what's available in the neighborhood. Maybe we can start discussing one of the city lots where there's a shuttling operation at some point, and that's the reason I asked if you have an AM rush of employees where 25 or 30 employees are coming at the same time. There are city lots within 5-10 minutes driving distance. We can put them in one of those lots, and then the shuttle picks them up and drops them off at the company, and vice versa at the end of the day. And maybe, I know that's not all the employees, but maybe that will ease the problem, and everybody can live with each other. Again, also I said it that the problem is not just this company. San Fernando Road is an industrial highway. It's not a secret. As much as we'd like to beautify it, and the city is doing a great job at it, across the tracks, it's all industrial. You have tons of employees that are employed by these big companies. They park all over the place. It's not honestly the cleanest neighborhood across the tracks. We need to be very, very clear about that. And they do attract bad elements, and that cannot be blamed on this company. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my position. I'm not ready to vote on this. I don't think enough has been discussed and done by both the company or the resident to solve the situation. We've seen similar situations, and again, my track record stands clear. I'm all for quality of life in the residential neighborhoods. I need the residents to understand that. And I need the company to understand that, because I'd like to go home and park right across my residence, honestly. I want to be within 20 feet walking distance. First, I make sure that I park in my driveway if it's available. If not, I'd like to be in front, but if it's a little inconvenience to keep a reputable, good company that's assisting the city with its taxable income, what have you, then we shouldn't chase them out. On the same token, the company, they need to be good neighbors, and they need to have a very strict policy within the company to discipline people. There are nuisance to the neighborhood, and there are those people. I haven't seen a company that's 100% honestly not guilty. So that's it. Those are more arguments. And again, I'm not ready to vote on this item today.
All right.
I'm the next lucky commissioner. Wow. Well, Commissioner Sahakian pointed out a lot of things that I also wholeheartedly agree with. I am also in the belief that I'm not convinced either one way or the other. There's still many issues for me, I feel, that I've left unresolved. Again, I agree also with the whole idea of quality of life. I'm all for that. I'm for the residents in that way. But on the other hand, this is, as he said, an industrial area, and we don't want to unnecessarily burden the businesses there. However, again, I wonder, where are these places where they can park? I feel like we haven't quite gotten the answer on all the available options for this business, where they could park. I mean, we threw out across the tracks. I'd like to know further up San Fernando, where are there available parking for them? I mean, in this city, we're starting a huge campaign for kids to walk to school. And we're asking them to get out of their comfort zone and walk to school back and forth. And I don't know why we wouldn't be able to ask that of people who work, to be able to park a distance away and walk to work. My only thing is, where are those places? And I don't feel like I have a good idea with what's been presented to me as to where that is. The other thing that was that struck me, again, this isn't an issue in terms of deciding or approving preferential parking. The idea of single-family homes being the mass majority of this area, the residents have options, unlike many other preferential parking applicants that come before us. Quite honestly, the residents don't have any options. So for this reason, I feel that on both sides, there's still some unanswered questions, and I would, as Commissioner, to second what Commissioner Sahakian said, I would like to see more effort and more outreach with 4-Over. I'm so very proud personally that we have a homegrown business in Glendale that's doing so well, and we shouldn't be punishing them unnecessarily. However, we need to see more outreach from them. I think that you haven't fully, done the best you can with your off-street parking. I think you can maximize that. 60% of your employees are from Glendale. I know it's a kind of a bummer to have to ride share. Everybody wants to have their own independence, but I definitely feel like with that kind of a percentage of employees coming from the city itself, there must be a way that we can improve on that. So again, I'm not in a position to go either way at this point.
Mr. Chair, if I may, one question to staff. How much is a monthly pass in one of our city lots?
The cheapest parking we have right now is in Orange Street Garage, $30 a month.
$30 a month.
John, I have a question. On these pictures, I think it's showing Kellogg Street. It's quite wide. Is there a possibility for diagonal parking on a street like that? Increased parking spaces?
Yes, there is a possibility, something we, as the commissioners were talking about, I was just exploring my thoughts of what is it that can we do to help the commission to reach it's something we need to look into in terms of diagonal parking, which obviously will increase, except that you still have number of driveways in between, which could cause some sight distance issues for the angle parking. If you have angle parking and you try to exit, backing out of driveways could be an issue. Something we should explore and look into it.
Okay, well, if I may continue my thoughts. First of all, I'm disregarding all the comments about litter and nuisances because they're unsubstantiated. Probably some of it goes on, but I'm not going to assign to whom it's happening. So I'm disregarding those comments. Other than the note, of course, the more parking, the more litter by definition. I guess I've been convinced by my fellow commissioners maybe we do need more study on this. I'm not convinced that crossing San Fernando, the railroad tracks, is a life and death experience. I think that's very doable. But I would like to know what is available on the other side of the tracks. And maybe if there's too much red striping, maybe that can be pared back. Maybe, I don't know how wide those streets are, maybe there can be diagonal parking on those streets as well. Just let's find out how much parking is within a couple of blocks on the other side of San Fernando. I'd also like somehow the city or the company to investigate, maybe despite the gentleman can't turn his car, maybe there is room for some more tandem parking. I see from the spots there's a lot of reserve parking. Maybe that can be, I know executives like their spot, but maybe that can be somehow maneuvered so they're not going, and I'm not just going by the empty spaces in the picture. Whenever there's assigned parking, there's going to be it's not going to be an efficient use of parking. The Armstrong Nursery is down the street a bit. They have a parking lot. Maybe there's an ability to lease some spots. I'm sure they need it, but on weekdays I think they're less busy than weekends. Maybe there's an ability to lease some spots from them, and maybe there's other spots in the neighborhood. One of the neighbors mentioned the cars protruding into the driveway. I can sympathize with that. Maybe the solution for that is some red markings in front of the curbs to give a little more space. Which cuts down, but that might leave room for the garbage cans and for drivers. So I think, based on what I'm hearing, let's defer. Let's find out what the true inventory is within a radius, including the bad side of the tracks, and let's see what we come back with.
Okay, my turn. I have to say I'm pretty much in agreement with my colleagues in terms of maybe not necessarily wanting to make a decision on this tonight. And in fact, that's not really even a possibility. As chair, I can't make a motion, and all of my colleagues have indicated that they're not quite ready to go there yet. So I don't think even if I were to pass the gavel, it would necessarily allow us to proceed on this tonight. I would echo the comments that I've already heard, and just to take a step back a little, obviously, this is an issue in Glendale, not just in your area, but in many other areas as well. South Brand and the Brown Boulevard of Cars is another one. And this commission, a few months ago, did grant a petition for preferential parking to the residents of Windsor Street, who are being impacted by employees who work at Pacific BMW. So this is a pervasive problem in Glendale. It's not just affecting your neighborhood. And on the one hand, I'm reluctant to take a piecemeal approach to this, because what we really need is, and we are moving in this direction as a city, is citywide policy on parking, not just preferential parking this area, that area. That being said, we do in our municipal code have a current procedure for preferential parking, and that procedure has been followed in this case, and a petition has been submitted, and under our municipal code, I would think under normal circumstances that we would move ahead. And speaking for myself, I do have bias towards the residents somewhat in this area. And I'll tell you, the thing that actually bothers me the most is that the folks from 4 over, you don't want preferential parking, you're not willing to park across San Fernando Road, doesn't seem to be any serious investigation of leased parking, and you're telling us that you can't do any more carpooling or use of public transportation, even though 60% of your workforce is local. And so I kind of get the feeling that there is more that can be done from both sides to achieve possibly more consensus than what we're seeing here tonight. One of the things that occurred to me was, instead of 2-hour except by permit, what if it were 3-hour? You wouldn't have the same issue with having to go out twice a day to move your car. You may only have to move it once, especially since the 3 hours would not start till 9 a.m., meaning you wouldn't have to move your car until lunchtime. And if it was moved the requisite amount, it would be, you could leave, at 3 or 4 p.m. without having to move it again. So I'm not sure where we go from here. I don't see. With you in a sec. I don't see a consensus at this point on bringing this forward or having a motion. So let me go to my colleague here for his comments.
Let me make just a few more comments. I understand driveways aren't part of the analysis, but can you? I don't know. I'm not exactly here to get a sense of what the driveway availability is. Maybe there's certain spots in front of certain houses that have the preferential parking, bifurcated. And sort of going off one of the points that Chairman Weissman made, I also don't get a sense the company is really wholeheartedly doing this. So let us say this preferential parking, let's use that as sort of a club. It's something out there. So please consider your options, because, like Chairman Weissman, if I have to come down on one side, I'm bound to favor the residents. But I think there's more to be done. So let's try to work it out before we have to put anything like that in place.
Mr. Chair. Well, what I'd like to see, so we leave here with a task to be done, is if the residents, they want the homeowners association to represent them, the homeowners association to meet with an appointee by the company, and maybe a commissioner and a staff member to sit down, work it out, look at what's available in the area as far as parking. I really want to explore the option of parking in a city lot. $30 a month, that's a freebie almost. and if a 14 to 15 passenger van can be leased, I think there's even subsidies for that if you're to do that. And when you have, at the peak of employee arrival or departure, use the van to go back and forth. There's a lot of things that this group can look at to see how we can resolve this problem. But preferential parking is the easiest way for us to say, yes, go ahead and implement it, leave the company in the water, and get done with it, put it behind our back. But it's not the responsible thing to do. So that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is that, and now I forgot what I was going to say. Thanks. I was going to say that, any time we have commercial and residential properties bordering each other without any kind of buffer zone, such as what we might normally get with multifamily housing, this is a problem. Okay, here's what I was going to say. I think the folks at 4 Over mentioned that when they started out in 2005, there were 40 to 50 employees. And so in 2005, the parking was sufficient for the facility. And over the years, as there's been growth and expansion, it's become insufficient. I would perhaps have in mind the issue that if you're going to be even more successful and you're going to grow even further, at some point you're going to have to say you've outgrown that facility. I certainly don't want to be in a position of having to, be part of an effort to push you out of there. But I think it's something that needs to be considered. At some point, if you're up to 120 employees there, you may be successful and have to hire more people. At some point, you're going to have to say, we've outgrown this facility and we need to start looking for someplace else. And I sincerely hope that if that does happen, that the someplace else will be in the city of Glendale. So, Jono, do you have any?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, we appreciate the concerns of the Commission, and we've had the same concerns. By no means the city wants to drive out a business where we try very hard to sustain businesses in Glendale and help them out to stay. This is a very typical problem we have in where we have businesses next to residential. As the commissioners mentioned, South Brand, where the auto dealers are, is a very typical situation like this. Larger magnitude, many auto dealers, they've been there for many years, and the employee parking is a problem. Whether they have inventory or they put employees, they have too many employees on site, they can't have enough inventory, so it impacts their business. We are, as the Commission has been presented with solutions in terms of looking at forming a parking districts, looking at within the district still allow some of the businesses to park by buying permits. So if you issue a residential parking permit to the residents on a street, a certain percentage during the day can be sold to the businesses, so the business employee can also park.
And I would hope that would be one of the things that would be discussed if we do have
as you know, that's not part of our current ordinance. That's something we're working on South Brand. We also need to look at it from a citywide standpoint, so that's coming into the works. Having said that, I think we can go back, look at the key issues the Commission raised. Obviously, we can do an inventory of parking on the west side of the San Fernando Road in that area, because, again, parking in some areas on some of those streets, also it's industrial, is impacted. Making sure, we just don't transfer the problem from one business to another. That's one issue. I think overall I definitely second Commissioner Fott that the Flower Street crossing that we just built about a year and a half ago is probably the safest and the best crossing, has the most advanced equipment and advanced preemption for trains and special crossing gates for pedestrians to make sure that it's safe for pedestrians to cross and vehicles to cross. So I don't see that as an issue from just a safety technical standpoint. but is there available parking across, and how far you have to walk to get there? So we can do an inventory of the on-street parking availability to see how many of the businesses, employees can actually park across the street. If there's so many other impediments, we can look into that. We will do an inventory actually of the driveways to the residents. I did ask Jeff. We didn't have a count, but at least some of the residents do actually have driveways with one space. Some have maybe two space. We can do an inventory. That's not that hard to do so. We'll look into the tandem parking on site and see if it's technically possible to add some. Definitely encourage the businesses to maximize their parking, including looking into leasing some parking spaces. Where the new bridge was built, the Flower Street crossing, underneath that bridge we have a plan to put in a park and ride facility. And there is enough land there. We are looking into the funding. Not that it should be used for, off-street parking for businesses, but it is a inventory of parking that we can use in case some business employee parking needs to be done. I know for a fact along San Fernando Road, there is not enough parking for all the businesses. Every business is going to need their on-street parking in front. Some already have half-hour parking, loading zone, as well as 2-hour parking restrictions on a block-by-block basis. But we'll still do some inventory up and down San Fernando to see how that works. I'm just going over my notes from the comments the commissioners mentioned. As far as shuttling, given our current situation, we will not be able to do that. However, up to any business wants to buy parking in the Orange Street garage or any one of our parking structures and operate the shuttle, that is definitely an option we can explore with the business. And as far as timing of all this, we need some time. So what I request the commission, I checked with the city attorney, that we can postpone this commission action, not too far out there, but I don't want to set a date specific until we get some of the information. If one of the commissioners would like to work with staff, or one or two of the commissioners are interested to work with staff, obviously we'll contact the businesses. We are very cooperative working with the Homeowners Association to form a little subcommittee to meet with them and try to explore all these ideas in a cooperative way. We'll be happy to do so and then postpone commission action to a certain future date of the commission. And I will be happy to give you updates in the next 2 commission meetings to make sure that this item is moving forward. It's not going to stay there. We will give it a priority to address this issue. So if any commissioner wants to volunteer, that's fine. If not, I think staff, we can still form a committee with businesses, not just one business, but all the other businesses. The auto body shop also impacts the neighborhood. They should be a part of this.
Well, I could volunteer. I don't live too far from the area, so I'm somewhat familiar with it, so sure.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. So your commission's action could be just to postpone. No action. Okay. We will just bring it back to the commission. We'll be happy to just put a brief letter to all the residents just to let them know what occurs. So at least the ones who are not here, they were not able to see the commission meeting, although it gets repeated, what transpired here as well as the businesses. So we will inform them. If we get additional comments, we'll be happy to address them. Okay, thanks. And I apologize to the folks here tonight. If you were expecting a decision, we do want our decisions to be high quality and to be taken after consideration, careful consideration of all the pertinent facts. So apologize for that, but this will give us an opportunity to explore this in more depth and hopefully come to a better solution. Thank you. Okay, what is next, please?
Item 7, Commission Staff Comments Updates.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to have Tad have a contact. I mean, we do have contact with your firm. However, I'd like to have someone that will be the point person to work with us on this issue. Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. And we do have a contact for the residents.
Yes,
And if it were not, I wouldn't have a problem, but it's just barely over. That's what I thought too. Yeah. We'll have a minute here for the room to empty out, and then we'll continue.
Well, at least
No
they were
one
representatives. They had the employees.
Except the folks at home.
No, they don't. They're two people, for God's sake.
Okay, if you'd like to proceed with the staff comments, John.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Commission, Chairman Weissman had requested me to give you an update on a number of items, one of which it has to do with the status of Assembly Bill 529. I had briefed the Commission that Assemblyman Gatto has been working with the City of Glendale, our police department and staff, in order to look into changes in the California Vehicle Code that requires the local agencies that we set up the speed limit. Under the 2004 law, in the California Vehicle Code, it forced the local cities to establish the speed limit by just a simple way of putting it. If we use what's called the 85 percentile speed limit, where we measure the number of vehicles that are traveling on a segment of the highway, we calculate the 85 percentile speed, which 85% of the motorists are traveling at or below that speed. And let's say, for the sake of discussion, that speed comes out to 32.6 miles an hour. Previously, before 2004, we could round it down to 30 miles an hour, and then we could reduce it by another 5 miles an hour based on conditions not apparent to the driver, whether it was schools or they were curves in the roadway, many driveways, business district. We could still round it down to another 5 miles per hour. After 2004, the law requires that if it's at the midpoint, below the midpoint, we can round down. If it's above the midpoint, which is 32.6 is above the midpoint, we would have to round up. So we would round up to 35, and if there were no other conditions apparent to the driver that we could justify, we would have to set the speed limit to 35 miles an hour, whereas, let's say, it was at 30 at the time. Then you take a 5-mile reduction if you could justify. Assemblyman Gatto, with technical help from us, our police department, has recommended the AB 529, which has now essentially gone through the transportation, local government appropriations committees of the State Assembly. It has cleared all those. Now it is going its way to the State Assembly. And it's making its way. This is the first time that it's gone this far. In the past, it has hit some obstruction and hurdles through different trucking industry. Sometimes the AAA has objected to it. So it has gone farther than any other assembly bill has gone with respect to the speed limit issue.
And my understanding is the latest news is that it has passed the assembly on a 71-0 vote.
71-0 vote, and now we believe that it's going to go further. And AB 27 passed the assembly for 71-0 on May 19. And it is on its way to the Senate side for the hearing. So as the city staff and the police department, our police chief has sent a letter of support for this. The latest we know, City of Thousand Oaks, City of San Luis Obispo are also in support of it. I think many of traffic engineers that are faced with day-to-day with setting speed limit, they're in support of this bill. So we hope that will clear the state senate and become law, and accordingly we will then look at our speed limits, how we set our speed limits using the new law. That's the status of it. We are working hand in hand with Assemblyman. We're appreciative of all of his efforts to this day.
And I hate to ask you to make any predictions, but do we know the time frame for?
It all depends. With these assembly bills, it goes through committee after committee, and if there's no obstruction or any disagreements, it should move. It's moved faster than the previous bills, very similar to this, and I think we cross our fingers that it will move faster.
Thank you.
That was one of them. The other issue was that you had requested has to do with setting up speed limits near schools, the 15 mile per hour California Vehicle Code 22358.4, which allows local agencies to set speed limits at 15 about 500 feet from schools. We are, as I updated the Commission, we're looking into this. We have been talking with other cities to see how they're implementing it. There are some concerns about the location of the signage. There are concerns about if it could become a speed trap, technically, in terms of you're in residential street, it's 25. How would you sign it properly within 500 feet if there are no intersections in between? Making sure the signs are visible. Do we put in flashers so that we can catch the attention of the drivers, making sure 15 miles an hour is visible enough so that if they get cited, they don't claim that there was not adequate signage, because that becomes an issue all the time. We're also working with ITS, Institute of Transportation Studies, Berkeley, to do an assessment of all our traffic safety program within the city. I've personally requested them to do some research statewide on this to see what efforts are being done by other cities. So there's some consistency with the signage and the process that we are going to implement it. There are some target schools. Hoover Toll Keppel is a good candidate for it. That if we were to start implementing this, that would be an area which we believe already people cannot go more than 15 or maximum of 20. So that's a good location to try that. Again, the visibility becomes an issue that we're trying to address that as well. So it's in the works. The third item, Mr. Chairman, you requested has to do with the flashers, whether in roadway warning signs. Again, with any pedestrian crossing that are marked, the vehicle code requires that motorists slow down if see a pedestrian in a crossing. With the yellow flashers, it's essentially giving you the warning that there is pedestrian, so you have to slow down. So we do surveys at this location. We find some motorists, even though the flashers are on, pedestrian is in the crosswalk, they do not slow down, and that's part of our police department has been very active in citing those motorists who don't pay attention to the warning lights, as well as having pedestrians in the crossing. But as far as drivers, if you see a flashing light, they have to slow down because there is a pedestrian crossing. That's what we anticipate drivers to behave. Unfortunately, not all of them do so.
The reason I asked about that was there was a letter, I guess a couple months ago, to the Glendale News Press by a driver expressing confusion about how to properly deal with that. And I think maybe the question was, if you do come upon a mid-block crosswalk and the signal is flashing and there's a pedestrian in the walk, you're stopping and waiting for that pedestrian. Can you proceed as soon as it's safe, as the pedestrians pass you? Do you have to wait for them to reach the other curb?
Once the pedestrian is out of the way and the path of travel is clear, they can cross. It's very similar to when you're making a right turn at an intersection and you see a pedestrian. If they're at the midway point, it would be a good practice to wait till the pedestrian crosses from the middle of the street and crosses the clear. But if they're just stepping off the curb, and some drivers are anxious to make their right turn, if the path is clear, they're not going to create a safety situation. They're able to make a right turn. Or if they're facing a pedestrian which is at the corner, as soon as they walk the way from the right turn lane, it's safe to make a right turn, then you can make a right turn. So those are some of the reasonable it's expected from a driver's behavior, how to act if they see a pedestrian in a crosswalk.
And that's actually consistent. I mean, you have to let them pass in front of you until it's safe for you to proceed.
That's correct.
Okay.
I just wanted to add something to that, to the improvements aspect of it, Jono. I don't know if you know, recently the Caltrans has just updated their, it's called the Complete Intersections Guidelines. They had been, I think they had something in the works in 1985, something like a policy guideline, and then they started to refurbish in 2007, and from 2007 till I think just recently, they have the updated, I guess, guidelines on reconstructing intersections and interchanges for bicyclists and pedestrians. And although this, I think, was directed towards Caltrans staff, it also serves as a great guideline for local governments who are working within their city to improve the safety issue, for pedestrians. This seems to be just a pinnacle time for us in Glendale to also, keep our ears out to what Caltrans has discovered in that regard.
We use the Caltrans design manual, and we do the update, and as they get updated, we use those anytime we're going to restripe an intersection or we're upgrading an intersection. We use the updated manual of uniform control devices as well, and if they get any updates
Yeah, I
to
think
those,
it just came out, so I think that's a new thing to look at.
So we always have to stay up to date with those new guidelines. So
very good.
And I think we even go beyond that, but in any case, the minimum guidelines, we follow those.
What about the new street name signs, the new guidelines for the street name signs that they came up with?
It's a budgetary issue, but it's something I'm sure every city will be faced with.
I have the commissioner's got an email from a resident regarding on Brand Boulevard, you can't top off the parking meters? If you know what I mean, and is that the case?
Once you on the parking meters, once you put in money for an hour, you can go up to 2 hours as you start the meter to do a transaction. But in order to come back and add additional time, that was a problem we encountered. As people were confused, they have to register, they have to write down their ticket number if they didn't get a receipt, to come back and add time to the space that they were parking. It was creating a lot of confusion with the users, and the majority of our transactions, we did a survey. Majority of the transactions, we didn't have a situation where somebody has to add time.
What's the confusion? I don't understand.
It's just that you have to, once you do a transaction, you have a ticket number. People will just get the receipt sometimes, and they throw the receipt away. In order to come back, you have to, unless you had your ticket number and the space number, transaction number, you have to enter it into the parking machine.
You just can't punch in the space number?
Well, it just becomes a new transaction.
Yeah. But you can do it?
It will become a new transaction. So you would add more time to the existing. You couldn't, let's say if you park for an hour, when you come back, we get some complaints about those. Well, I paid for an hour and a half. Why can't somebody else use that half hour that is available? I only park, for 1 hour. That was one issue. However, if you go back and you want to put the same money for that same space, let's say you park space number 23, you can put money and it will start a new transaction.
Well, so if a person, say, bought 2 hours worth and they come back after an hour and a half and they say they want to add another hour, you lose the half hour.
The half hour, that's right.
Is that just a programming thing, or is that by design?
It's not a programming thing. It became a very difficult thing because people, they just lost their receipts. They don't keep their receipts because you have to.
But I'm I wouldn't keep the receipt. I'm one of the scofflaws, I guess. But I would hope to remember the parking spot. So if I'm space 23 and my dinner's going longer, I can't. And if I know the space 23, I can't go in and just top it up. It's a new transaction, and I lose the half hour.
Yeah. It's become.
So you're better off waiting till that half hour's expired.
So I'm just
before
wondering, is that a, you can do that with just knowing the space number, right?
Yeah, you have as I said, that you lose that portion that you
The
paid
unused
for.
increment.
The unused increment. And the transactions that we looked at, majority of people, when they start their transaction, they actually paid for the total amount that we're expecting to park. But there are people who, let's say, yes, they all of a sudden they wanted to stay longer, and instead of paying for an hour extra, now they're paying an hour and a half extra, for another half hour, because they couldn't add to.
Well,
the
again, so is that a programming thing, or is that by
It
design?
is possible to. It's by design right now, because we had a lot of issues in terms of people trying to add that time.
I don't see the problem. You have 23. You go to punch in 23. You throw in
You
some
have to
coins.
also
and
have
you
your
do it.
It's more complicated than
It's
that.
more than that. There is an add time feature that we had, and there is a transaction number on the ticket that you had to
You have
put
to
in
punch
there.
in the transaction.
Right.
Yes. And that's to prevent people from using other people using your own time space?
Right. Because that's how the system works. You have to have some kind of a reference to your previous transaction.
But even now, if you have the receipt, you have all your paperwork in order, you still can't add time.
We took it out because, again, there was a very minor number of people using it. In some of our lots, like Lot 6, which is at the Portos, what we call the lot behind Portos, that became a problem because you just would have a lot of people waiting in line when somebody was trying to figure out. It's not as simple. It sounds simple, but it's not as simple. That was one of the issues. Tad is here if he can add to what I said.
Well, I mean, I hear what you say. If you need a receipt number, that becomes a complication.
Yeah.
But certainly counterintuitive, and I can see if I were doing it, I would be very...
Now, I remember doing it once back when you still could do it, and you did have to have the receipt. It does have like a 5-digit or 6-digit transaction number on it, and not only that transaction number, but your space as well.
But you can't. But just to summarize, you can add, but you wipe out any unused time. Because I think this email implies you can't even do that. So okay.
You can, yes.
Okay, well, that's...
Our assessment is correct.
That may not be ideal, but it's
It's not ideal, but it is a majority of our transactions. Almost, Tad, help me out, how many percentage was... We only had when we were able to do this, it was almost 90...
It was 97% were not using the add time feature. 3% were using the add time feature during the first year when we analyzed it.
And they were gumming up the worst.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so how is the occupancy looking? Are you still looking at occupancy for the metered spots on?
Yes, we have basically interviewed a number of companies, vendors that are now in the occupancy sensor business for parking occupancy. There used to be one or two, there's more of them. So as much as we try to start with one company which we tried, do the demonstration part, they're still in use. There's other companies that have surfaced, and we are in the process of issuing an RFP that if we're going to do it, we have to go through a competitive...
So tell you how many spaces remaining in the lot?
This will actually keep occupancy of every space. So when a space is vacant, it will let us know, and it will also send a signal to our system. So we can always keep occupancy. We can know how many spaces are occupied in a parking lot or on street.
For statistical purposes.
For statistical purposes, also, it does add the feature to enforcement, that if a parking space is occupied but it's not paid, it will let you know. Because there's a compliance issue as well. But one of the problems we encountered in some of our lots, like the Lot 6, which is behind Portos, is that if that lot is so busy, you may have people standing in line are actually in the process of paying, and their space is, when our parking checkers go into that lot, they find that that space has not been paid for, whereas the person is actually in the process of paying. With that system sensors in place, they can actually see as soon as that gets paid, that space is valid. They don't have to issue a citation.
You've mentioned this Lot 6 a couple of times. I mean, is one solution another parking station? Or what
We
call
have
them?
multiple parking pay stations on that one. It's still, it's still busy.
There's at least 4 of them, right? Or maybe
Actually,
6.
6, right?
There's actually 6.
Six.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And adding one actually has the reverse effect. It's just another place where someone can be standing and paying for their transaction that the enforcement officer
Well,
can't.
but I understand, but you said people were queuing up behind people.
Yeah, because as much we encourage, we say you can pay at any pay station, the ones that are most convenient in front of the, behind portals, people queue up to that one, and then it becomes a familiarity issue. Once after that, they start using the other ones.
So you're not going to put one by the deli counter?
No.
All right, are there any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, one more comment. I'm
Please.
sure, as you know, we are in the process of developing the Bikeway Master Plan. Commissioner Flood and Yakubian have attended 2 of our meetings. We've had a community meeting that was well attended. Right now, where we are is we received a lot of input from the Bicycle Advisory Committee on routes, bicycle lane facilities, locations. We're working with our consultant team in order to basically put that all on the map. We're trying to do as much of the engineering up front as possible, making sure that where everybody desires bicycle lanes or sharrows or type 1 or 2, they're practical, we can safely install them. It will be coming back to the Bicycle Advisory Committee in June for their review recommendation. Then we'll have another public community meeting citywide to receive input from the residents, businesses on the routes that have been recommended. Once we get to that stage, we will bring it to the full commission for your review, get a recommendation, whether through a study session or a presentation to City Council to get Council on board, and then we'll finalize the plan and go from there. So it's moving along at a pretty good pace.
That sounds good, and I would like to thank our commissioners who volunteered to serve on the committee. And also, I'm sorry he's not here tonight, but Commissioner Welch is going to be moving on, and we're going to be getting a new commissioner in this seat. And I just wanted to be sure to thank Commissioner Welch very much for his service. We're going to miss him. He's, I believe, a very keen analytical mind, and I think he made some very valuable contributions while he was here, and we wish him the best of luck in his new job. And if there's nothing else,
Mr. Chairman, just to add to your statement, as soon as once the new commissioner is appointed, we will definitely recognize Commissioner Wells. We'll invite him to the commission and at least recognize him and give him a plaque. So that is part of our commission's tradition, so we will do that for sure.
We'll give him a gold card parking spot.
okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move.
I second.
We are adjourned.